You're listening to Binjang at 91.5, and it's time for Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Good afternoon, Matthew.
Good afternoon, Tony. Thanks for chatting to me again.
Yes. Well, it's coming up to tax time, and that also means it's coming up towards scam time, isn't it?
It is. The ATO's already sent out an official warning to all Australians about the latest scam, which is a MyGov email scam. Now, when it comes up to tax time, people are expecting to get their head around tax and expected to lodge their tax return. It's all very easy to do now, and you've got the MyGov information. But of course, scammers send out scams at this time of year because they know that people are expecting to have something come out, or maybe expecting to do something with their tax. And the latest scam comes out with a MyGov looking image, very clever in the way they do it. They take the real thing and replicate it very, very closely to the real thing. And it asks you, of course, to log in and just check your details before you go and log your tax return, so everything's right to go for your tax return to come out. If you do fall for that scam, what you'll be doing is going to a fake scam site, or a fake MyGov site, and that will effectively look like a MyGov site. You'll type all your details in, but what you're really doing is sending those details to a scammer. So that'll be your name, your date of birth, your tax file number, probably your bank account details, pretty much everything that you would need to have your identity stolen in the first place, but you may even give them enough information to be able to just steal money from your bank account, for example. But most of the time, what they're after, scammers in this scenario, are after some sort of identity theft, and they've got all the details they need for that. So the Australian government's put out a warning and said, we will not send you out something to say click on a link. We will not send you out asking you to confirm your information. If we do send you something, we will tell you to go to the MyGov website independently of that email. So this is just starting, and the ATO has said we're only in May, so this will ramp up as we get into June and July. This sort of activity will ramp up dramatically. They're probably just testing their systems at the moment, the scammers, making sure they've got everything ready to go when the really heavy traffic hits. So really it's just a bit of a public service announcement, Tony. Be ready for those scams, and please don't fall for them.
Exactly. Now, cyber attacks can impact major infrastructure. It's becoming a big topic now, particularly in relation to the so-called grey war being mounted by China and Russia and Iran and North Korea. It's becoming big news. But there's also some criminals that are doing cyber attacks as well, and you can lump them all together, really. They're as bad as each other. So what critical infrastructure component in the US was the latest hit? Because this is pretty serious stuff, isn't it?
It is pretty serious stuff, and it's really interesting because we think of cyber attacks as maybe someone attacking your computer, or maybe like the MyGov scam we just mentioned, that it might be just trying to get some of your details. But computers are responsible for a lot of hardware items at the moment. And in the US, there's a major pipeline, a fuel pipeline, that is 5,500 miles long. It carries jet fuel and refined gasoline from the Gulf Coast up into New York, feeds most of the East Coast from there. 2.5 million barrels a day, Tony, is transported via this pipeline. And at the moment, this pipeline is shut down because of a cyber attack. Now, obviously, you don't just have a pipeline where you just whack a pipe in the ground and say, there you go, we'll just start shooting a bit of fuel along it. You've got a lot of monitoring systems along the way. You've got computers controlling that. You've got valves and switches along the way. So the cyber attack, what's occurred here is the owners of this particular pipeline have shut it down in response to the cyber attack because they can't be confident that all those systems along that pipeline are going to be running correctly. So the safest option is to shut it down. Now, that sounds pretty bad with 2.5 million barrels a day coming along that pipeline. At the moment, most of that fuel goes into storage and then is used from storage to be distributed up and down the East Coast. So it's okay to shut it down for a day or two. They probably even get away with a week, but much longer than that, then there's going to start to be some real issues along the East Coast. Probably the only saving grace is at the moment not as much jet fuel is being used as normally would be, because obviously we're not flying as much. So they're probably not using quite as much fuel as they normally would. So they're not going through those stockpiles as quickly. But it just gives you an idea of the impact that cyber attacks can have. And this particular cyber attack, it's just all about the money. It's ransomware. The people that have perpetrated this attack have simply said to the owners of the pipeline, pay us X dollars and we'll let you go on about your day and have a nice day, which is pretty dangerous because you might pay the money and then they decide that they'd like a bit more money, or they decide to do it again in 6 months' time. So it's a pretty dangerous scenario.
Yeah, that's quite a worry. Now, are you ready to jump into a robotaxi just yet, Matthew?
Well, I am, and some people are, but not everyone yet. But Pony.ai has got a huge array of robotaxis they've been working on. Their latest ones, though, make people feel a bit more comfortable because normally when you see a robotaxi, and the robotaxis that Pony's had out before, have some equipment on the roof of the taxi that looks pretty daunting. It might even scare people a little bit. There's a whole bunch of equipment on there, and that's the LiDAR equipment, the light imaging detection and ranging. And so that's looking around and drawing a picture using the laser imagery from that of everything that's around the vehicle. But the latest cars from Pony, basically you can't see any of that LiDAR equipment. So people probably feel a bit more comfortable until they get in and there's no driver in there. But it's all built in a very subtle way on the roof. There's just a slight lip on the roof where all the equipment is built in. So it's really being built from the ground up, ready to be a robo-taxi. In the past, they've taken normal vehicles, if you like, and just put the equipment on top. So this is getting to the point where the rollout of vehicles, the rollout of robo-taxis is going to occur faster and faster. And before we know it, we'll be joking around about the old days, Tony, when you used to have a driver sitting there trying to explain to him which laneway we had to go up. The modern version of that will just be a robo-taxi takes us the wrong way without us having to have an argument with the taxi driver, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But these will be out, these vehicles, which are shown already in a prototype form, will be out and being used in various jurisdictions in the year 2022. And basically, you'll see a lot more of these probably years after that. They're already in 5 markets at the moment, a couple of markets in California and 3 different markets in China. So they're being used now. They've been driven so far, the current versions of them, about 5 million kilometres. And the range, the area that they go in, is an area comprising of about 850 kilometres of roads across those 5 different jurisdictions. So it's not like you could jump in one and say, I'm in Wellington, please take me to Queensland, but I'm in Wellington, take me to Nenema Crescent or take me down the main street. You can go around that smaller area, and that 850 kilometres is quite incredible in terms of that range. So far they've had about 250,000 robo-taxi rides. So there are people getting in these right now as we speak and using robo-taxis.
It's interesting that Pony's using the LiDAR technology, which is used with most of these systems, but interesting enough, it's not being used by Tesla, and we did talk about that last week and how they've worked their camera system to a greater extent.
Yeah.
Also, it's interesting to note that in Adelaide, I'm pretty sure it's Adelaide in South Australia, they've had a robo bus operating now for quite a few years, 2 or 3 years, and I don't know how that's going, but apparently it's been quite successful.
Yeah, that is. That's going quite well. And the big advantage they've got for a bus, a driverless bus, is it's got a set route. It
fixed
goes
route.
from
fixed route.
it goes from a point to point to point and gets to the other end and then goes back in the other direction. So that's obviously much easier for people to program because the route's taken care of. It's just got to watch out for vehicles and people.
Yeah.
It's a bit different when you jump in the car at your house and say, take me downtown, take me to a certain location, and it's got to work out how to get there. It can map it out pretty easily, but then get you there safely.
That's very true. And you've been listening to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickinson on Binjang 91.5. Stay tuned next week for another 2 sessions next Tuesday. And it's back to the great music and information now on Binjang.
Great, Tony. If you've got to talk, at least talk tech.
Absolutely, Matthew. Absolutely.